Alright guys, let's get on with this Obelisk the Tormentor Egyptian God Structure deck triple deck profile. First off, we have Obelisk the Tormentor, the man himself. This requires 3 tributes to normal summon and cannot be normal set. This card's normal summon cannot be negated, and when normal summoned, cards and effects cannot be activated. Neither player can target this card with card effects, and once per turn during the end phase, if this card was special summoned, send it to the graveyard. You can tribute 2 monsters, destroy all monsters that your opponent controls, and this card cannot declare an attack the turn you activate that effect. Next up, we have 1 copy of Gizmic Uka, the festive fox of Vicinity, which allows you each time an opponent normal or special summons monsters, inflict 300 damage to them. And you can only use each of the following effects of Gizmic Uka once per turn. If a monster or monsters is special summoned from the main deck, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if this card is normal or special summoned, you can target 1 face-up monster that your opponent controls and special summon 1 monster from your hand or deck whose attack equals its own defense with a same attribute as that monster. And we have 1 copy of Gizmic Makami, the Ferocious Fanged Fortress. While 6 or more of your cards are banished, you can normal summon this card without tributing. You can only use each of the following effects of Gizmic Makami once per turn. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can discard 1 monster and add 1 monster whose attack equals its own defense from your deck or to your hand, except for Gizmic Makami. And if this card is in your monster zone is destroyed, you can shuffle 6 of your banished cards into the deck. Next up, we have triple copies of Evil Swarm Mandragora. This lets you, if an opponent controls a monster, or controls more monsters than you can special summon this card from your hand. This also is not a once per turn, so if you somehow have 3 of these in your hand, or multiples, you can just do that as long as your opponent controls more monsters than you. Next up, we have 2 copies of Cyber Dragon. If only your opponent controls a monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, so not bad. Next up, we have triple copies of Nimble Momanga. If this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you gain 1,000 life points, and then you can special summon any number of Nimble Momanga from your deck in face-down defense position. Again, a good way to kind of gain life points and get extra bodies on the board. Next up, we have triple copies of Ra's Disciple. When this card is summoned, you can special summon up to 2 Ra's Disciples from your hand and or deck, and it cannot be tributed except for the tribute summon of Slifer the Sky Dragon, Obelisk the Tormentor, or Winged Dragon of Ra. You cannot special summon monsters except by the effect of Ra's Disciple. Next up, we have the 1 copy of Bazu the Soul Eater. Once per turn, you can banish up to 3 monsters from your graveyard, and this card gains 300 attack for each until the end of your opponent's turn. Good way to banish monsters for your Gizmic Ikami, and also just a good way to be able to increase your Bazu's attack. Next up, we have Super Nimble Mega Hamster, whose flip effect reads, you can special summon 1 level 3 or lower beast monster from your deck in face-down defense position. That's also a good way to kickstart your Nimble Momanga mini beast engine. Next up, we have triple copies of Unmasked Dragon. When this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 worm monster with 1500 or less defense from your deck. Lastly, for the monsters, we have 2 copies of Mare Mare. cannot be special summoned except by the effect of a worm monster. And during your main phase, you can reduce this card's level by 1, and if you do, special summon one mini Mare token. Worm, water, level 1, attack 300 and defense 200. You can only use this effect of Mare up to thrice per turn. That's it for the monsters. Let's move on to our spells. So to start off, we have triple copies of Double Summon, which allows you to conduct 2 normal summons or sets this turn, not just one. Good way to get extra bodies on the board and have more monsters easily ready to tribute summon for your Obelisk the Tormentor. Next up, we have 1 copy of Pot of Avarice, which allows you to target 5 monsters in your graveyard and shuffle all 5 into the deck. Then you get to draw 2 cards. I might, if I do another rebuild of this deck, add a second copy, but I won't go more than that. Next up, we have 1 copy of Different Dimension Capsule, which allows you to banish 1 card from your deck face down, and after this card's activation, it remains on the field. Destroy this during your second standby phase after activating this card, and if you do, add the banished card to your hand. Again, another way to quickly be able to see your Obelisk the Tormentor or some of your other combo pieces depending on what you have in your hand and what you already are planning to do or want to see. Next up, we have the 1 copy of Monster Reborn, which allows you to target a monster in either graveyard and special summon it. Next up, we have 1 copy of Supply Squad, which allows you once per turn, if a monster or monsters you control is destroyed by battle or a card effect, you get to draw 1 card. Next up, we have 2 copies of the Monarch Stormforth, which allows you once during this turn, if you would tribute a monster for a tribute summon, you can tribute 1 monster your opponent controls, even though you do not control it. You can only activate 1 the Monarch Stormforth per turn, and during the turn you activate this card, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck, but that requirement really doesn't matter for this because there are no extra deck monsters for this deck because there was nothing in the structure deck. Next up, we have 3 copies of Soul Crossing, which is another key card for you to be able to get out your Obelisk the Tormentor, because this allows you, during the main phase, immediately after this effect resolves, tribute summon 1 Divine Beast monster. When you do, you can tribute a monster or monsters your opponent controls, even though you do not control them. But if you tribute summon this way, apply this effect. Until the end of the next turn after this card resolves, you can only activate 1 card or effect per turn, not counting the effects of Divine Beast monsters. You can only activate 1 Soul Crossing per turn. This is really great because this is a quick effect, and if you have Obelisk in your hand and your opponent has monsters, even on their turn, you'll be able to use this card to summon out your Obelisk and basically just interrupt their plays. Next up, we have 3 copies of Fist of Fate. This card's activation and effect cannot be negated. If you control a monster whose original name is Obelisk the Tormentor, negate the effects of 1 effect monster that your opponent controls, and if you do, destroy it. And if you do that, for the rest of the turn, the effects of that monster are negated, as well as the activated effects and effects on the field of monsters with the same original name. Then, if you activated this card during your main phase, you can apply this effect. Destroy all spell and traps that your opponent controls. You can only activate 1 Fist of Fate per turn. Next up, we have the 1 copy of Divine Evolution. This card's activation and effect cannot be negated. You choose 1 monster that you control whose original type is Divine Beast or whose original name is the Wicked Avatar, the Wicked Dragon Root, or the Wicked Eraser, except a monster or monsters already affected by Divine Evolution, and it gains 1000 attack and defense. If this card, its effect activations and its activated effects cannot be negated. Also, it gains the following effect. When this card declares an attack, you can make your opponent send one monster they control to the graveyard, their choice. Lastly, for our spells, we have the one copy of Harpy's Feather Duster, which allows you to destroy all spell and traps that your opponent controls. And lastly, for this deck, we have the one trap card, which is Drowning Mirror Force, which, when your opponent's monster declares a direct attack, shuffle all of your opponent's attack position monsters into the deck. And that's it for this deck profile of the Obelisk of the Tormentor Egyptian God decks.